for inviting me to come up here. I'm the management counselor, which is kind of a behind-the-scenes role at the embassy. I don't get too many opportunities to go out and speak to groups, so I'm very appreciative of that chance, and I hope I can start this off on a nice, upbeat, and interesting note. The Embassy and Auckland Pride have partnered once again to design a conference that we hope will be a safe and productive space for community support and a launch pad for new ideas. And, like all good sequels, since this is the second of this series, I think Next 15 builds on what works best in the original. Great partners, great venue, solid format, achievable goals. Hopefully it doesn't fall into the typical sequel trap of just having a better looking cast. We'll try to make even bigger impact this year. We're calling this the Strength in Numbers, but the conference itself will be what you all decide to make of it, individually and communally. We come together to meet and exchange ideas as peers, to learn from and to teach each other. We've made the program as inclusive as possible and tried to avoid any classroom-style teaching sessions, even though we're at a university. Facilitators are here to help, but the outcomes are in your hands, and we hope that you take advantage of the opportunity to share your stories, your experiences in each of those sessions and throughout the conference. So I want to first answer the question, why is the U.S. Embassy funding a gay youth conference in New Zealand? And I'm very proud to say that President Obama has made it clear that every individual deserves to be treated equally under the law and in the eyes of society, regardless of their sexual orientation. And that's a stance that has had some profound consequences. In late 2011, President Obama issued a memorandum that directed all foreign affairs agencies, like the State Department and others that operate overseas, to promote and protect the human rights of LGBT persons abroad. And the quote from him that I think is inspiring is that the struggle to end discrimination against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons is a global challenge and one that is central to the United States' commitment to promoting human rights. And if we go back in time a little bit, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, when she was secretary, established the Global Equality Fund, and she stated that gay rights are human rights and human rights are gay rights. As simple as that. And so that fund is specifically designed to support overseas civil society groups working to end discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Other governments around the world have since followed our example and are also lending support to that fund. And Secretary John Kerry, our current Secretary of State, has continued this work, promoting LGBT rights at global forums like the United Nations and during his bilateral talks with nations worldwide. And these efforts come within a broader drive by the State Department to engage with the changing needs and expectations of modern 21st century audiences. I think as an organization, we are adapting to those changing needs by becoming more inclusive in our work. Both locally and globally, we reach out to people who were traditionally overlooked or ignored by established elites. And we do this because we understand that equality cannot be imposed top-down. High-level support and gestures are vital, but it can't be imposed from the top. It's best achieved through grassroots movements, with individuals encouraging dialogue and advancing change in their own communities. So that's why we're supporting a gay youth conference here in New Zealand. It's a priority for us at the mission, at the American mission here, and with the U.S. government as a whole. We're interested in youth voices because it's the young people who most often have the drive, the enthusiasm, and the time, attributes which they're often more mature compatriots might lack. The demographics tell us that your voices will have an increasing role to play, not just within your groups and communities, but in this country as a whole. So, to be frank, it's in the U.S.'s national interest to get to know all of you. So, much of it's been achieved by those who've gone before us, but, lest we think that everything's full of roses, let's not forget that a large number of people, LGBT youth, in America and New Zealand and worldwide actually commit or attempt suicide or contemplate it. The numbers can be as high as 30 to 40%. And that's something to be awfully concerned about. Beyond New Zealand, across the broader region, which many of you are familiar with, especially our Pacific delegates, there are many cultural and political obstacles still facing LGBT communities. and it may, realistically take a generation or more to overcome some of those hurdles. So, in the U.S. government desire to promote LGBT rights as human rights, we need your help. All of us have been told in the past, I'm sure, that our views on this or that subject don't count. And perhaps in extreme cases, some of us have experienced being told that we ourselves are worthless. And here at Next 15, obviously that's not going to happen. Here in this space, we are interested in you, your experiences, your ideas. And let's face it, one subject that we're all experts in is ourselves. So let's talk about ourselves. So I'm lucky enough to work for an organization which values my contribution, led by bosses who are committed to advancing LGBT rights domestically and internationally. Not more than 20 years ago, this stance would have seemed as unlikely in America as marriage equality might have seemed here in 1995 or so. As recently as they wrote mid-90s, but let's say the 80s. You could still be fired from the State Department if you were thought to be gay. I joined in 1991. Nobody ever asked me if I was gay. I had heard rumors before starting that there would be a polygraph test or something to get my security clearance. That didn't happen. But I think a few years earlier, just in the mid-80s, you could definitely be fired if you were thought to be gay. Like many other gay individuals, one State Department Foreign Service officer named David Buss has faced numerous official interrogations about his social life. So in 1992, that was right after I joined, these investigations looked like they were leading to termination proceedings on him. I'm not sure what he got up to, but anyway. He decided that enough was enough. So he did what subversive national security risks always do. He called a Sunday brunch. And he formed an employee group to defend gay officers and to advocate for change in the State Department. And that was, a move that was not without personal risk for him at the time. So he created an organization that we call the Gays and Lesbians in Foreign Affairs Agencies. It's a long acronym, GLIFA. It started out with, 5 or 6 people, and now I think we have maybe 200 members. No, more than that, maybe 500, I'm not sure. And it's a very strong organization that advances diversity and workplace equity in the State Department, the Commerce Department, other agencies that work overseas. They started, as I say, like in the early 90s. They were setting policy goals, looking for ways to increase visibility of gay and lesbian issues in foreign affairs agencies, and while ensuring ground rules for confidentiality for those members that were still fearful of repercussions. Some of the things that can be attributed to their action, to this group's action. 1999 was the first time that we had an openly gay ambassador appointed. His name was James Hormel. I think he was appointed to Luxembourg, I'm not sure. That was not without dispute. I remember that there were quite nasty confirmation hearings in the Senate for him, but he was confirmed. In 2000, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright launched a policy to allow domestic partners to accompany staff overseas, created a new term that we called members of household. That was, it sounded great at the time. It was sort of, these things have to be taken in steps. Reese and I met in 2002 when I was getting ready to go to my posting in Jakarta, Indonesia. And when I, 2 months after we met and I said, hey, you want to go to Jakarta? He said, sure, why not? Then the next question was, well, how does he actually go? Well, so the State Department did not pay for his plane ticket. I had to pay for that myself, even though obviously they pay for travel of spouses. They wouldn't pay for anything, but they would, officially let him live in the house with me, and he was recognized by the community as a member of the embassy community. We had to jump through some hoops to get him a visa to be able to stay in Indonesia. The government, we didn't get any help on that. But basically, the Indonesian government was willing to give him a visa as my personal staff. So he was my butler. I don't know what it said on the visa. I don't think I kind of surprised, I doubt we were fooling anybody when we went into the Indonesian embassy on DuPont Circle in Washington and said, here's my employee. But, you know, they looked the other way and they issued that visa. And actually, a few years later, 3-4 years later, when we moved on to our next assignment in Slovakia, middle of Europe, same deal. Slovakia, even though it was in the European Union, wasn't quite as progressive as others, and it was another personal assistant visa that we got for Reese. So it wasn't until 2009, the new administration, Secretary Clinton was at the State Department, that we saw something that really helped us personally, you know, and that was when the Secretary said that we should give what we call eligible family member. It's an important acronym for us in the State Department. Eligible family member status for same-sex partners. And basically she instructed the department to extend as many benefits as possible under the law to same-sex partners. So suddenly we were able to not have to pay for the travel ourselves. They would, you know, evacuate the same-sex partners if we had to evacuate them, you know, at government expense. They could use the health facilities and all that sort of thing. It still wasn't quite equality because we weren't, even though Reese and I got married in Washington, D.C. in 2010 when it became legal there, the federal government did not recognize the legality of the marriage until the Supreme Court decision in 2012 that overturned a law that the Congress had passed under the Bill Clinton administration. And so that allowed the government to recognize the marriages of gay people. And so now Reese is, you know, a full-fledged spouse. He can travel with me anywhere. The New Zealand government gives him a visa as a spouse. And we've reached what I think is at least domestically for us in the United States, so a very great place. Going back to the Glypha story, that gay and lesbians in foreign affairs, obviously they had a hand in a lot of this. They were very instrumental in trying to convince Secretary Clinton back in 2009 that this is something she could do. There were powers there were powers short of changing the law that she could take to improve the situation for those of us in the Foreign Service. And I credit the leaders of Glyph at the time for being extremely convincing and effective on that point. Let me see. I think I want to pass it on to David here. So let me just wrap that up and say that today and the first part of tomorrow, let me suggest that you network, you share your dynamic ideas, you aim high. You don't forget that real advances are often made down in the trenches of employment legislation, financial entitlements, and things like that. Reach out to your neighbors in other cities and nations, understand what they're going through, and see how you can help. And while you are all here because you are currently or you are willing to be activists, the theme of strength in numbers lends itself naturally to a push for increased visibility. Let's not forget those among us who are not so comfortable with a high profile and who are still fearful of repercussions at home or in their place of education or work. So with that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker. Or you can introduce David for us? All right, cool. Thank you very much.